All right. Hello, friends. Kyle here, giving you a DAW plus my sultry voice video. Was going to do a face cam, but my GoPro was overheating, which is not so good. But at least you get to hear me this time, and it's not just another video of the DAW playing riffs. Anywho, I've had a few friends hit me up recently asking me about my recording setup, writing process, and all that good stuff. So I figured since I'm halfway through recording guitars for the Aethereus album, might be a good time to talk about that. So here we have Reaper. There are many DAWs like it, but this one is mine. And this is what I've been using primarily for recording guitars, vocals, bass, MIDI sequences, synth stuff. I've used Studio One, Pro Tools, Cubase. All of them are fantastic, and I think they have a lot of strengths that Reaper does not have. But for my purposes, Reaper has been more than enough. I've spent a long time kind of building out templates for this just to make my recording a lot easier. So basically, if I'm jumping into a writing session or I'm jumping into a recording session, whether it's for a cover, an Aethereus song, a Blighted song, any of these, it's very, very easy for me to have something that's more or less where I need it to be without needing too much tweaking. Usually, in the case of the Aethereus album, adding extra tracks that, are kind of little supplementary things. So when I'm opening something up, typically starting with a rhythm guitar tone, some sort of a lead, an overdrive, and a clean guitar. And then I'll usually have like a drum sequencing program like Easy Drummer or Superior Drummer. In this case, since this is for the new Aethereus album, I actually have Aaron's live drums that I get to play it with, which is very nice to have. This is just a mix down of the full kit that I'm using just because I don't need to have 18 or 20 some odd drum tracks in this already when there's already 23 tracks worth of guitar stuff. So this song is pretty bare bones compared to a lot of the other ones, and given that's going to get made up for once we start doing the vocal tracking, because there are a lot of vocal layers on this for both my singing vocals and Vance's aggressive vocals. So there's going to be a whole bunch of extra shit added to this by the time it's done. But this is more or less the starting point. So I can kind of just walk through the tones and just show you what I'm working with. The main rhythm tone that I've been using lately, that'll likely be making it onto the album, is the Gojira. And that's just the hard right one for the actual track. Usually when I'm recording, I'll have a track made in Reaper that is specifically just for recording. And then as I record something, I can kind of drag it down into the plane where it's supposed to go. So if I'm working on the rhythm, for example, I can record my rhythm part from here and, get up to a certain point. If I can get a full take, that goes super long, then I'll do that and I can drag it down here. And then that way, if I'm punching in or something, I can start a little earlier as the riff is playing, play along with it, and then it just makes blending it a little easier. I found that if you start right on the beat and then you're doing it on the same track that you're recording to, you tend to have certain things that are missed, like right at the very beginning of it. And I don't know, it's nice to feel more of like the whole context of whatever it is that you're recording, rather than just really doing it in piecemeal. I'd rather go back a little bit, record a little bit of the previous riff into the next one, just so it sounds more seamless. Generally speaking, it's just better to get big chunks of it done in one take so that it all sounds seamless. But yeah, so typically I'm working with this rhythm tone. This is the tone I've had dialed in. It's the third amp for the Gojira X, which I believe is a 5153 Stealth is what it's based off of. I could be mistaken. This one I've got slight tweaks. Bass is a little bit lower. Mids have been bumped up a little bit. Everything else, depth has been rolled back a little bit. Rolled off a little bit of the top end on this, but this honestly might have just been how it is on the graphic EQ in general. Biggest difference is on top of the stock 57 IR, I also have an Angle 412 IR that I've blended. Most of these stock sound very good. And I think you can watch a lot of like URM Academy stuff, and you can see a lot of people who will just use some of these just like stock right out the box without tweaking them, and you can make them sound really good. They don't need a whole lot, but it's nice just to add your own little stamp to it so that you're not just using the exact same kind of like default tones, which again, nothing wrong with those. Those are great starting points. They can just be great in general. But I wanted to just put a little bit more of a unique stamp on the tone so that it sounded a little more like me. So, that feels a little better. So yeah, that is the main rhythm tone for this song, for the lead tone. So instead of my typical lead, which is usually using the nollie, and it's kind of like a digi-delay sounding lead, so there's no reverb on it. This one's a little bit more of a reverb heavy one. I call it big lead alt. So this is using the second amp, but the third cab. And I don't think I changed. Yep, this is just using the stock ones with the levels slightly adjusted. Nothing done to the EQ. And then you've got a little bit of, you got the shimmer on the reverb, got a little bit of delay. And then overdrive is slightly a little bit more with the tone. I think on the rhythm I'm using kind of like the TS9 thing where you have the distortion and the tone down and then the level turned up a little bit just to give it a little more of like a boost. This one I'm actually using a little bit more of the tone from the overdrive on this just to color it. But it's a nice, very wide sounding one. It gives it kind of that arena sort of rock. You know, cool, big, shimmery lead tone that works really well when you're trying to have like this soaring sort of epic melodic part. And I like it. And that's all that really matters. Then down to the overdrive for this song. I'll actually just put this in the dead center so you can hear it a little better. Where is my panning? There it is. So this one, I believe, yeah, this is the nollie. I call this falafel OD lead. I think I was listening to some Fallujah. Scott will get some of these nice, very crunchy sounding lead tones that are also very drenched in reverb and delay, and they sound very sick, and that was kind of what I was inspired by while I was building out this tone. And I think I've used this for leads too, but in this case, using it for the overdrive tone. It works really well. It kind of adds to the atmosphere. The overdrives in this song serve more of like that atmospheric purpose. So that's what I'm using them for. And I think, let me check on this. Yeah, so this one I just have the 157 turned on, have the other IR turned off. Nothing done to the EQ. Slight tweaks, mostly on just the head. And it's mostly just like a slight bump to the mids. And the presence depth is at, noon. Masters rolled back a bit, but... But it's a night, despite being very reverb heavy, you still get a lot of articulation out of it. It's not super muddy. It can serve that nice atmospheric, somewhat leady purpose too. So very nice. All right, so then we get down here to the clean guitars, and I think for all of these guitars, the tone is exactly the same. It's using the Airy guitar pad, which is one that I created on here for the Archetype Rabia plugin. It's a really cool plugin that I've talked about this one before. I feel like it is a very underrated one in Neural's arsenal. The rhythm tones are great. The lead tones are fucking awesome. The rhythm tones don't really work as well, at least for what I'm looking for. I tend to prefer like the Gojira or the Nolly. But for clean guitars and weird lead guitars and synth stuff, this one absolutely rips. So this is kind of the building blocks for all of the clean tones that I have for this song. I will use the Archetype Nolly as well for other clean tones. That's for more if I'm going for like that kind of like Trace Denaire cynic sounding clean tone where it's that almost like super sterile direct guitar signal going in, but it's got that weird sort of crystalline quality. This has a little bit more character to it in a way it's more of like that kind of Pink Floyd sounding clean tone, that. And then you split the coil. So then down here, get into the synth guitar stuff, which there's quite a bit on this. I think for this album, I took more of an approach of wanting to use less of like the synth plugins, which there are plenty of really cool plugins. I've used a lot of the East-West stuff before, especially on Leiden. And, they're very cool, but there's some where they're like immediately identifiable, and I just didn't really want that. And also, for me, my native instrument is a guitar, so being able to do synth stuff with a guitar, it opened up a lot more possibilities for me to play around with these parts and experiment with parts, whereas before I'd be in like the piano roll, having to just handwrite a lot of this stuff to try and make something. And this is just, it's a lot easier for me to just go through and come up with cool ideas using this stuff. So I'm able to use the archetype Rabia for all sorts of fun, funky, weird sounds. So this one, synthy synth guitar shimmer. Just a very like cavernous thing that's mostly supposed to blend with the actual lead that's playing over the top. It's kind of supplemented. It adds a little bit of extra texture that you don't just get from the lead guitar by itself. And then we get down here to the space synth. This is this one just sounds nothing like a guitar at all. So this one's very synth heavy on here. That's primarily what you're getting coming out of this. You don't really hear any of the guitar in it. And it's interesting because you'll get some really cool sounds if you just sort of let stuff ring out. It'll, as the synth tries to kind of correct itself and play like an actual note, because it doesn't quite capture the transient details of like a guitar when you're like letting it ring out and you get the feedback. Instead, you just get this sort of like this computer glitching out, which can lead to some really, really cool sounds, which I've got a few on here that I'm excited for everyone to hear on the album when it's all done. And last but not least, we're here at the Saxy synth, which is again that kind of Richard Wright, Wish You Were Here inspired sounding synth, except it's my guitar. It's kind of saxophone-ish. If you hear it in a mix, it sounds a lot more like a saxophone. By itself, it just kind of sounds wonky, but it's another one where you're not really getting as much of the actual guitar shining through in this. It's more of the synthesizer that it's being processed by. And it's another one kind of like with the guitar pad. You get some weird sounds that you wouldn't typically get if you like let things ring out as the synthesizer tries to correct itself. This one especially. And it sounds really cool. Again, playing on my native instrument, being able to come up with synth parts without having to have a keyboard or hand drawing MIDI maps, it's a lot more enjoyable and engaging. I get a lot more of that, like that immediate feedback from what I'm doing rather than kind of having to do a bit of the guesswork. So that's kind of my general recording setup. Hopefully that was informative. Hopefully you guys liked some of this. You found some utility in it. I don't know if I did or not. Who knows if I'll even release this. But since y'all have stuck with me for so long, I figure I'll show you a little clip of a new song up until, let's say up until that point, right, when it comes in and it's nice and heavy. But yeah, here's a little sneaky peeky.